Welcome back to today's edition of Better Than Before. I'm Tony Richards, and I'm extremely happy to welcome our special guest today. His name is Kevin Davis, and he's the president of TopLine Leadership, which provides customized sales training and sales management development programs. His third book, The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top, is available from Amazon.com. Early in his career, Kevin worked for a Fortune 200 company in sales management and general management responsibilities. He understands the unique challenges faced during the transition from sales to managing salespeople and the transition from managing salespeople to managing sales managers. Kevin's also the author of 2 sales books, Getting Into Your Customer's Head and Slow Down, Sell Faster. And so I'm really happy and excited to welcome Kevin Davis to our show today. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Tony. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Kevin's joining us today from Reno, Nevada. And so what's the attractiveness of living in Reno, Kevin?
Well, we're at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. My favorite ski area is a 15-minute drive. 15 minutes in the other direction is a good airport. And I live on a golf course, so I'm kind of touching all the bases.
A friend of mine who lived in Nevada, or he still lives in Nevada, and I were having a conversation, and I asked him, and he was not from there. He moved from Chicago to Nevada. And I said, so what was the attractiveness of moving to Nevada? He said, it just checked all the boxes. You know, it's just beautiful. We have nice weather. Golfing is good. And the development I live in is wonderful.
And there's no state income taxes.
There you go, man. I love that. I love that. I've just added that box to my retirement place I want to live.
Well, my next door neighbor put that into a Google search window, and that's how he ended up moving here.
I am so glad that you're with us today because I've been wanting to have an expert on sales management on our show. I think that's a highly undervalued position, and would you agree that there's a lack of really good sales managers in the workplace today?
Yes, and part of the reason is because managing and leading a sales team is a completely different set of skills than selling, and so many sales managers just don't receive the training and education that they need in order to make an educated transition from selling to managing.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of times what happens is that, and we're going to get into this in our discussion, but that salesperson who gets promoted to sales manager has their highly developed skills that they try to put through the rest of the people. They know really well how they did it, right? And so they're trying to mold everybody else in that instead of, you know, going about it the way that I'm sure you're going to tell us a sales manager should. So I want to talk about your book, The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness. Great title, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top. Why don't you just start out by telling us a little bit about your book and why you felt compelled to write it?
Well, we've been delivering our sales management leadership program since the mid-1990s. And have had the privilege over the years to work with some of the world's most successful sales organizations and the leaders that really are responsible for top. I mean, a sales manager has enormous influence over the productivity and performance of a team. And so making that manager as productive as he or she can be, to give them a plan, to help them to be more focused and to really take a step back and rethink their priorities and engage with the team in a way that enables them to do the things that they can do that other people can't. And that's one of the critical issues, Tony, is that sales managers, there's so much coming at them today that they play defense and they're overwhelmed by everything. And as a result, they end up doing things that consume their time that prevent them from doing things that nobody else can do except them, which is coach, teach, develop, hire people that have great skills and can then develop and have a coachable way. You know, I mean, hey, if we have a sales rep on our team who's not coachable, maybe the reason is we haven't been coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. So anytime a manager gets in a reactive state, rather than a proactive state, they're starting to tread water. And we know that treading water can only be done for a certain amount of time, right?
Well, that's true. And like I said, the overwhelmed aspect of it, it comes at them. And one of the instincts that all sales managers have that they really developed and were rewarded for as salespeople is a high activity level. And they feel good. They often get a jolt of adrenaline, almost a feeling of intoxication by being really busy. But ultimately, the question they've got to ask themselves is what I'm about to do have a measurable impact on the performance of my team? Really, we have to insert that question into our thinking on a daily basis, because all too often the answer to that question is no. And yet these things rob us of time and they take us away from our people. That's what hurts performance.
Yeah, let's dive into this subject of, and I feel like as a CEO and a leader of an organization, I've made this mistake. I mean, I will freely admit it, and do quite often when I'm working with my clients. I've promoted the great salesperson, the high producer who wants the next challenge. I've done that. I've moved that high producing salesperson into that sales manager role, only to see them really languish and not fail, but possibly not be as fulfilled as they possibly could be, because they weren't producing like they were as a salesperson. So let's dive into that a little bit. So what's the biggest skill set change that happens going from salesperson to sales manager?
Well, they have to recognize that their number one priority is to teach and develop rather than to sell. They continue to do what comes naturally. Well, one example is they chase big deals. And a lot of times this is caused by their companies. Look, like right now, we're coming up near the fourth quarter. Companies are saying, hey, sales managers, we need your team to produce more. So get out there and figure out who has the best opportunities and get out there and close them. So that's a case where the company actually distracts the sales manager. But think about where that sales manager then goes. He or she goes to the salespeople on their team who were working the largest deals, who conversely are the people who probably need the least amount of coaching. The salespeople a manager really ought to be focused on are the B's and the C players that have the greatest potential for improvement. So really the key transition is the mental one that says, my number one priority today is to help at least one salesperson get better today than they were yesterday. That could be set daily activity goals. It could be working with them to develop their skills in a certain aspect of the sales process. It could be observing and coaching and talking to them. But ultimately, coaching has proven through research to have a significant impact on the performance of a sales team and the retention of high performers. At some point, we've got to say, are we the best coach that we can be? And if the answer is no, perhaps it's our fault. What are we doing to get in the way of releasing our brakes and allowing ourselves to become the best sales coach we can be?
That's great advice, Kevin. Let me ask you this question. This just occurred to me. Do you find, in your experience of working with all of these companies, do you ever find a situation where management is asking the sales manager to do double duty, where we want you to manage the sales team, but we also want you to be a producer too?
Yeah. And look, that's a necessary step for many sales organizations that are striving to grow. They're kind of caught between. They have experienced salespeople and they want to grow. So they bring on a couple of additional people and there's nobody else around to teach them. So while this is a fact of life and a necessity for many companies out there, I think back to an old Chinese proverb. He who chases two rabbits at same time never catches a rabbit. You just cannot sell and coach and lead at the same time effectively. And what happens is people tend to fall back on what they know the best, which is, of course, selling.
Right.
And the coaching and leadership and teaching aspect of what they ought to be doing takes a back seat.
So managers of all kinds, not just sales managers. So anyone listening to this podcast that's not a sales manager, I want to make sure they know that we're talking to them too. But managers of all kinds tell me they're coaching all the time. And I know in your book, it sounds like you don't think that's the case, and I don't believe that that's the case either. I think they may be doing some things that they would categorize as coaching, but what are they saying?
Well, in my book, I cite the Sales Management Association did a study on when their sales managers are coaching salespeople, what is it that they're talking about? I mean, what are the topics? And they did this big survey and they gathered all this information and they boiled it down to 13 different topics. And the first several, and I don't remember off the hand all of them, obviously, but the first couple are questioning about a deal, talking about an account plan. It's deal-specific conversations. And the interesting thing was that way down near the bottom of the list, in the least frequent topic that sales managers discuss, was identifying skill deficiencies. And so what we're doing is we're talking about deals and we think we're coaching, but we're not really having that second focus, that second mentality of what does the salesperson lack in skills or attitude that is preventing him or her from moving forward. We're so focused on the deal and the discussion that we forget about the development.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of those discussions are about price and quantity.
Right.
Around a specific client. So how do they narrow down and identify those most effective topics that they should be addressing then?
Well, I think first and foremost, they have to change their cadence. What I mean by that is, their instinct is to pay attention to deals that are approaching the bottom of the pipeline and getting ready to close, and we want to get in there and try to close those deals. But the die has already been cast on 90% of those opportunities. And if a mistake was made by the salesperson, it was probably made a week, a month, even 2 months ago, and we're too late. So we're coaching the wrong end of the sales process. We should be more focused on the front end, and that's less interesting to us, but yet those are the critical skills in consultative selling, our account penetration, getting appointments with key decision makers, sending great memos of understanding that describe the customer's discontent in a way that is compelling for that decision maker, positioning ourselves and really the whole sales differentiation equation. All that happens long before many sales managers really start paying attention to a deal. And it's a huge miss.
Have you identified any psychological or belief system type tendencies that are different in really high-performing sales managers and high-performing salespeople?
Well, one of them would have to be patience, and it's so counterintuitive. Also, another one is, dare I say, a lack of trust. One of the things that many sales managers fall victim to is their optimism. And optimism can be a great leadership skill unless you apply it improperly to a sales forecast, right? All of a sudden, you've got your salespeople saying, well, I'm going to close this deal, I'm going to close that deal. And it's just like, well, maybe you should be a little distrustful of these forecasts and ask better coaching questions sooner.
We call that healthy skepticism.
Yes, that's good. Healthy skepticism would be a great attribute for a successful sales manager.
Do you find, these are just things that are popping into my mind as we're talking, but do you find any great sales managers that maybe didn't come up through the sales, or do almost all of them come through the sales organization?
I mean, I have certainly met some managers that came up through the other side of another part of the business. It's hard for me to really get in there and without working at the company and seeing are they really successful or not. I just see them interact in a workshop and talk to them on the phone and that type of stuff. So it's hard for me to actually see their numbers and see the production of their teams.
Do you see the what I kind of call the Superman manager who dashes into the phone booth and comes out in their Superman costume, especially on a call, and just sort of saves the account or jumps in front of the salesperson and You know, when you were talking about that earlier about reversing your habits and reversing your, tendencies and stuff, I would think that's one where if you're a high producing salesperson and you're sitting watching your salesperson on a call, and when they make a few mistakes, you try to fix it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I learned that lesson early on. My first sales manager was a guy named Guy Campbell, and he was phenomenal. And I started out, I was struggling as a new hire, but Guy stuck with me. He really worked with me, and he saw some potential. Well, 3 years later, I got promoted to manage my own sales team. So I called up Guy and I said, Guy, I wanted to ask you some questions about what you did so well, and any advice you have as a sales manager. And by the way, Guy, I want to ask you, that first year and a half, whenever you went out and you worked with me in the field, I noticed that you had this funny sort of habit where, we'd go in to meet with a prospect, and Guy would pull a coin out of his pocket and put it there in the crook of his hand. And, what did you do that for? He said, well, Kevin, he said, when you started out, you were pretty bad. But I knew as your coach that in order for you to learn and grow, I had to let you do it yourself. And then if I jumped in and took over, I would defeat the coaching opportunity and defeat your learning opportunity. So, Kevin, what I would do is I'd put that coin in the crook of my finger, and the worse and worse you did with a customer, the harder and harder I would squeeze. He said, Kevin, I had to create a point of physical pain that was greater than the pain I felt watching you screw up the meeting.
But hey, he found a way to cope with it, because otherwise he wanted to jump in, right?
Well, exactly right. And we talk to sales managers all the time that have been through my program, and they say, yep, I'm squeezing a quarter.
One of the things I always am looking for is if I can find that big constraint with that performer, that leader, that manager, that executive, whatever. And in your book, you talk a lot about that being the time element and mismanagement of their own behavior as related to time. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. And this, again, gets back to a core attribute that many sales managers developed and were rewarded for as salespeople, and that is 100% responsibility. They're responsible people. And so what happens is a salesperson brings them a problem. Tell me, Tony, if this sounds familiar. Hey, Tony, we have a problem.
Right.
The use of the pronoun we. And because you don't have all the information you need to make a decision, what many managers will do is tell me, hey, Kevin, let me look into it and I'll get back to you. And in the blink of an eye, two things have just happened, which typically are descriptive of a subordinate in a relationship. Number one, you accepted a delegation from a salesperson. And number two, you agreed to give that salesperson a progress report. Some of these things are just really, really simple. You've got to rethink how you're handling the day-to-day issues that come at you. A better way to handle that situation, what I call the two magic questions. And that is when a sales rep brings you an issue, you say, what have you done about it so far? What do you think ought to be done? And if you just ask those two questions, then you're at the very least involving the salesperson in the solution. And in many cases, they're closer to the problem anyway. Why are we taking all this stuff on our plate?
Right. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I could keep this going forever. I'm going to transition here to our questions that we ask every guest that come on the show. So I've got a list of 12 pretty quick rapid-fire questions for you, Kevin. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So overall, what's the best memory that you have that comes to mind for you?
Well, I would say that the birth of my son and daughter.
That's wonderful. What are their names?
Lauren and Kyle.
All right. And what's your wife's name?
Dale.
Okay, good. How long you guys been married?
We have been married next month 38 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Congratulations to you guys. Who's the number one hero in your life?
My dad. He worked his way up, worked for IBM and General Electric, and He served our country and taught me the skill sets that I've needed to overcome the challenges of life, right?
Well, that's awesome. God bless him. What is the top value you subscribe to?
The top value, do what's right for others.
Most important person in your life?
My wife.
Your favorite thing in the whole world?
Snow skiing.
What's your favorite food?
Steak, filet.
Most beautiful place you've ever been to?
Trunk Bay.
Where's that?
Down in the Bahamas.
All right. If you could describe success in one word, what would that word be?
I'd say 2 words, daily passion.
Good. How do you want to be remembered?
As somebody who helped others in a way that made a difference for them.
Great. Advice for a younger Kevin Davis?
Get your solid training, get in with a company that invests in you, and get that track record established. Prove yourself in that realm. And then if the entrepreneurial bug bites, trust your gut.
What's your favorite sound?
Hitting the flag stick.
All right. And finally, what's the best lesson you've learned?
The importance of personal development.
Okay, good. We've been talking to Kevin Davis. He's president of TopLine Leadership, and we've been discussing his book, The Sales Manager's Guide to Greatness, 10 Essential Strategies for Leading Your Team to the Top. I would highly recommend you go to Amazon.com and you get that book right away, because sales managers need a lot of help, and Kevin provides a lot of great advice in his book. Now, Kevin, if people want to find out more about you or about your company, where should they go?
Well, they can look me up on LinkedIn. Kevin Davis, also TopLine Leadership is the name of my company. So toplineleadership.com, either of those ways will work just fine, but sign up for my newsletter. I've got a sales manager's newsletter that goes out weekly, full of tips. I've got an article appearing in Selling Power magazine next week titled, Are You Ready for Your Best Q4 Ever?
Wonderful.
So there you go.
Great. Well, I'm going to go sign up for your newsletter right now.
Thank you so much, Tony. Great to talk to you, and also share this time with you this morning. It's been great.
Receive weekly coaching tips from Tony Richards, delivered straight to your inbox. Whether you're a CEO or an entrepreneur, Tony can help you reach your goals and give you a competitive edge within your industry. Tony's Monday morning coaching memo covers topics ranging from leadership development to teamwork to company culture and more. Text the word leadership to 38470 to sign up for Tony's Monday morning coaching memo, or sign up online at clearvisiondevelopment.com.